Alrighty then. Okay, Yahusha's in the waiting room. Let me try to get to him real quick. All right, so we're live, everyone. Shabbat shalom, all of our brothers and sisters up there. I trust you're having a great Shabbat. Yahuwah's day of rest today. So, as usual, we were doing our Sabbath day study, book by book, chapter by chapter reading. I will start us off in Deuteronomy 8. I think what I'll do, since it's just convenient, I have it in front of me. I'll use for the Masoretic, I'll use my hand, I guess what you would call mini leather bound ESV here, and then for the Septuagint, I'll have for you guys on the shared screen the Septuagint of the Bretons, and we'll kind of compare here as we're reading along. So let me see here. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Let's make sure I have it set up here. Okay. So let me go to share. And what we're going to start doing here, especially when expounding, we're going to try to expound in a way that to explain how we can make these commandments, basically applicable to our lives, and more a better expounding, so that those of you that are listening in can kind of understand how we're supposed to, apply this stuff. Okay, so let's see here. I like the linen color. I'll click on that. Okay. All right, so LXXE, where are you? All right, so go to Deuteronomy 8. Okay, so remember Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall observe and do all the commands which I charge you today. Okay, hold on, let me just fix this. I thought I would have already had auto rotate on here. Where is it? No, not portrait. Interesting. I guess they don't have auto rotate on here. Kind of interesting. Oh well. All right. You shall observe and do all the commands which I charge you today, that you may live long. You may live and be multiplied and enter into inherit the land which Yahuwah your Elohim swore to give to your fathers. There. Let's see. This way, since there's no way to do a rotate screen. Okay. You shall remember all the way which Yahuwah your Elohim led you in the wilderness, that he might afflict you and try you, and that the things in your heart might be made manifest or be revealed, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He afflicted you and strained you with hunger, fed you with manna which your fathers knew not, that he might teach you that a man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Elohim shall man live. Interesting to note, this shows that the New Testament clearly was being quoted by the from the Septuagint and not any Hebrew copy. The reason I say that is because if you look at the New Testament, it will say, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Elohim, or in the Greek theos, shall man live. So you can literally pair that with what Yahusha said to the devil, word for word. So Yahusha himself would have been quoting from a Septuagint. Your garments grew not old from off you, your shoes were worn from off you, your feet were not hardened. Lo, these 40 years, you gotta love the Middle English language, lo. You shall know in your heart that as if any man should chasten his son, so Yahuwah your Elua will chasten. Okay, moving on to verse 6 here. Getting a little bit of a glare here from my light. And you shall keep the commandments of Yahuwah your Elua to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahuwah your Elua will bring you into an extensive land where there are torrents of waters. Interesting. It says, I noticed that the word extensive is not in the Masoretic. That's a little interesting. Where there are torrents of waters, fountains of deep places issuing through the plains and through the mountains, a land of wheat and barley, are vines, figs, pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey. A land on which you shall not eat your bread with poverty, and you shall not want anything upon it, a land whose stones are iron, and out of its mountains you shall dig grass. Another thing to keep in mind is this promise Yahuwah gave us is a specific, it pertains to a specific land, not everywhere we live. So we might want to keep that in mind. So you shall eat and be filled, and shall barak Yahuwah your Elua on the two land which he has given you. Take heed to yourself that you forget not Yahuwah your Elua, so as not to keep his commands and his right rulings and ordinances, which I command you this day, lest when you have eaten and are full and have built two houses and dwelt in them, and your sheep are multiplied to you, and your silver and gold are multiplied to you, and your possessions are multiplied to you, you should be exalted in heart. Now this would be, talking about pride here. And forget Yahuwah your Elua, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, who brought you through that great and terrible wilderness, where the biting serpent, I want to look into the Hebrew of that. I really do, because I have a funny feeling it's actually talking about the Seraph Nakash there. Yeah. So even though it says biting serpent in the Greek, if you look at the Hebrew, it says Seraph Nakash, where the Seraph Nakash and scorpion in drought, and where there was no water, who brought you a fountain of water out of the flinty rock. Now, basically, Masha is retelling some of the stuff that happened to them in the wilderness, which, if you remember in the book of Numbers, right, Yahuwah sent seraphim, or even if the word seraphim wasn't originally there, you still have nakashim, plural. You still have these nakash type of beings. Yahuwah sent them to punish Israel. So anyway, so that's, to me, it's interesting. Verse 16, who fed you with manna in the wilderness, which you knew not, and your fathers knew not, that he might afflict you and thoroughly try you and do you too in latter days, lest you should say in your heart, my strength and the power of my hand has worked for me this great wealth. But you shall remember Yahuwah your Elua, that he gives you strength to get wealth, even that he may establish his covenant, which Yahuwah swore to your fathers, as at this day. And it shall come to pass, if you do at all forget Yahuwah your Elua, and should go after other mighty ones and serve them and worship them, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you shall surely perish, as also the other nations which Yahuwah Elua destroys before your face, so shall you perish, because you hearken not to the voice of Yahuwah your Elua. Now, what's interesting to me is, again, I think the Masoretic here, if I'm not mistaken, just says Yahuwah instead of Yahuwah Elua. So I find that interesting. So I would like just to make a note of that. see here. Where's my pen? Deuteronomy 8. Is that verse 20? LA6 has Kurios Theos there, while Masoretic text just has Yahuwah. And I'm wondering, I remember looking at this one time. Yeah. Instead of voice of Yahuwah your Elohim, it says, this is interesting. This makes perfect sense with the Brit Hadashah here. In the Targum Onkelos, it will say, so shall you perish because you would not obey the word of Yahuwah your Eluah. So it's calling the voice of Yahuwah the word of Yahuwah. Interesting. So, yeah. The word of Yahuwah your Eluah. And that's a future study I would like to do with our fellowship is many different times when the Masoretic or other versions will say, Yahuwah your Elohim or whatever. Instead of Yahuwah, the Targums, a lot of the times, I would say almost 80% of the time, instead of Yahuwah your Elohim, it will say the word of Yahuwah your mighty one. So that's going to be a future study showing the oneness there. It's a good side topic study to add to all the proofs of oneness in the Targums. But anyway, so that was pretty much it for Deuteronomy 8. I mean, this is a retelling of the covenant. This is a retelling of, you're about to go into this land. You better keep all the Torah. This is the prerequisite to entering the promised land. And again, like, this is how we know the Torah is not done away with. Why, if Yahuwah doesn't change, right? Why would he give this as a requisite for Israel to come into the earthly Jerusalem, but somehow the heavenly Jerusalem, we don't have to do that to enter into the land or inherit, the promised land. Somehow his requirements are now thrown and done away with. Doesn't make any sense because then he changes. So if Malachi says he doesn't change, he doesn't change. That means his requirements before are his requirements now. So, that's the context of Yahuwah does not change. And Hebrews 13:6 reiterates that, but instead of saying Yahuwah, it says Yahusha Messiah is the same yesterday, today, forever. Same concept. Okay, so he's not going to change. He's not going to change his character. What he required before, he's going to require again. So, anyway, let me see. I think Brother Yahusha might have something he wants to bring up. Let me just go back to. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
I'm sorry, man. Completely. It's off topic. I just need to date my notes real quick. Is this the third month or the fourth month?
Let's see. Let me check that real quick. It might be. I'm thinking the fourth. Let me see here. One is. Usually I go to the one is the newmoon.com just to kind of keep track. Okay. So May 20th, 2023. That was usually they tell you the number here. Okay. Third. Okay.
Third. Okay, thank you.
So May 20th started the third. We're about to hit the fourth month.
Yeah. It should be Monday.
Okay. So I'm glad you actually asked that, though. I'm actually glad you asked that, even though it's off topic. It is important to keep track of that. Okay. Right. Monday will be.
Tonight will be the 29th.
First of the fourth month on Monday. Okay, I'm writing that down for myself as well. So, all right. So yeah. Yahuwah willing, we'll try to have a new moon meeting whenever the new moon actually hits. I'm probably thinking Tuesday afternoon, just because usually the new moon will hit on evening, usually, or right before evening is when usually the new moon is. So yeah, I think we'll try to aim, Yahuwah willing, try to aim for like 3 p.m. on Tuesday. Write that down as well. 3 p.m. Eastern. Okay, but yeah, I'm glad we actually found that out. So yeah, I wasn't seeing much difference here, other than obviously verse 20, verse 3 definitely seems to show that Yahusha quoted from the Septuagint when he talked to the devil, because like I said, the Hebrew would actually say from the mouth of Yahuwah instead of Elua. So definitely seems like he if now obviously we're giving the Greek New Testament the benefit of the doubt that it was Theos originally. So we're kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt. If that's the case, that he definitely quoted word for word from the Septuagint, because it's word for word the same. In today's LXX with the Byzantine, it's like word for word the same. So if that's the case, Yahusha definitely quoted from the Septuagint when he was being tempted by the devil. See here. And the Seraph Nakash to me was the biggest difference. I found that interesting. Even like we said, even if it's just Nakash that was originally in the Hebrew, you have Yahuwah referencing again these Nakashim beings that he sent to punish Israel that time in the book of Numbers. So and I forget. So and I think the controversy is, I think I remember, Brother Yahusha, you bringing this up before, is that in the Greek of that chapter in Numbers, it only has Nakash, right? Or my bad, it has only the word for serpent. I forget which one.
You're asking me if it's in the Greek?
Yeah, like which part of the compound was actually in the Greek? Was it the Nakash?
Which verse?
Let me look in Numbers where it talks about the he sent fiery serpents to bite them. Sent fiery serpents. Numbers 21, 6-10. And the reason I brought this up again for the viewers and listeners is because it uses, in the Hebrew, it uses the same compound in Deuteronomy 8:15. So that's the reason I'm linking those two.
Yeah, in the Greek it only has Ophis.
Okay, so Ophis would be, let me see if I have I know I have a Strong's Plus here. Let me try to figure out what that would equate to. The Ophis would probably be the Nakash, maybe?
It's snake, serpent. With the ancients, the serpent was an emblem of cunning and wisdom. The serpent who deceived Eve was regarded by the Yehudim as the devil. That's theirs. Strong says, through the idea of sharpness, of vision, a snake, figuratively as a type of sly cunning, an artful, malicious person, especially Satan, serpent.
Yeah. And my Strong's Plus on the eSword here gives me two related words. It's only related to two Hebrew words. Nakash is related to Drakon or Ophis. So yeah, it seems like, according to the Septuagint, in the original Hebrew, you would only have Nakash there, not Seraph. Okay. Yeah, I remember that. All right. So that means if the Septuagint's right here in Deuteronomy 8:15, it would be more correctly translated as from the original Hebrew, it'd be Seraph, not Seraph. it would probably should say, with its who led you through great and terrifying wilderness, with its Nakash or Nakashim if it was plural, and scorpions and thirst and ground where there was no water. Because I think even in the Greek, Deuteronomy 8:15 has that same word. It has ophis, if I'm not mistaken. So that's that same word. Seems to be talking about the same event. So anyway, that's just something to look more into. I definitely think it's plausible they could have added the word seraph in there. But definitely so fiery in the Hebrew is what's being mistranslated as seraph, by the way, in Deuteronomy 8:15. So it would read the same from the Hebrew as Numbers 21:6, and the Greek is showing actually that the word fiery is really not even supposed to be there anyway. It's just supposed to say serpent or nakash, really is what it's supposed to say. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
I just wanted to touch on verse 2. Well, in context with verse 1, you shall observe to do all the commands which I charge you today, that you may live and be multiplied and enter in and inherit the land which Yahuwah your Elohim swore to your fathers, and you shall remember all the way which Yahuwah your Elohim has led you in the wilderness, that he might afflict you and try you, and that the things in your heart might be made manifest, whether you would keep his commandments or not. To say that, I heard another Christian, this is the common thing that we hear, is that you can't, he delivered us from a law that we couldn't keep. If that would mean that we serve an unreasonable Elohim, an Elohim that tells us to do things that we can't do, knowing that we can't do it. And that's not the definition of a loving Elohim. If he's testing Yasharal, if he's afflicting them and trying them to see whether they would keep his commandments or not, then it only goes to reason. If you claim, Yahuwah is Yahuwah and he is all the characteristics that the scriptures say, then, it just kind of goes to reason that he would give you something that you could actually keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Yahuwah never says, he never gives us allowance in his word, just to piggyback off what you say. He never gives allowance in his word for us to just give up just because we can't perfectly keep his law in our flesh. He knows we're not going to be perfect, but he still desires us to, he still wants us as his children to desire to obey him. That's the point. Regardless of whether we can fully keep the law without failing one time. That's besides the point. That's kind of like they try to use that as a scapegoat. Oh, we can't fully keep the law without failing. Okay. But is Yahuwah saying that he's going to punish you because you fail? He knows you're going to fail. He has mercy. Okay? And actually, that goes back to what scripture says. And this is, I think more people would understand this if the Masoretes didn't change things. So recently, I re-recorded for us Deuteronomy 4-7. The last verse of Deuteronomy 6, according to the Septuagint, says that his mercy is given to those that actually obey him. Okay, it says here, verse 25 of Deuteronomy 6, there shall be mercy to us if, keyword, if we take heed to keep all these commandments before Yahuwah our Elohim as he has commanded us. To me, that's saying he knows you're going to fail. He knows you're going to mess up. But if you're desiring to obey him and obeying him and trying your best, there's going to be mercy for you if you fall. That's the point. You see what I'm saying? There's not mercy for people that don't care and don't want to try. He's not going to give his mercy to them because they're outright being lawless. So what you got to understand is his whole character. He's not giving, his mercy is not ecumenical. contrary to popular belief. It's not ecumenical, and it's not to the whole world. Okay, if you want to stay in your sin, he's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna keep forgiving you. That's not his character. That's not his character. If you want to stay in your sin, he'll let you stay in your sin, but you're not excluded from the judgment from that. You see what I'm saying? So that's what people need to understand, is that there is a prerequisite for his mercy. There is a prerequisite for that. And it's a desire, just like it says there's a prerequisite for his spirit to dwell in you. It says that those that obey him, he gives his spirit to. So again, this really for us should not be a hard concept. It's just that Christianity has twisted and perverted the Bible to the point where people think this is, they think of this as like workspace. It's not workspace. You're not earning anything. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Their part of the covenant was to obey it. That's their terms. They're doing, if I obey him, I'm not earning his love. I'm doing what he requires me to do. I'm doing my job. It's not, I'm because Christianity will try to twist and pervert this and say, oh, well, see, you're talking about earning his mercy. Or no, I'm not. But at the same time, he doesn't have to give his mercy to everyone. You see what I'm saying? He chooses who he wants to give his mercy to. This is all over scripture. So you can say on an educational understanding, I believe. But if you keep disobeying him, there's going to come to a point where he's not going to give his mercy to you. And he has every right to do that. We're not entitled to have his mercy. And that is the biggest problem with Christianity, is a sense of entitlement. That everyone's equal. Everyone is entitled to his mercy. No, not true. Not true at all. So just to piggyback off of what Brother Yahusha was saying, is that to me, the two don't equate to one another. He was requiring them of keeping his commandments. Did he know foreseen that obviously they were going to break them, and obviously they were not going to be able to keep them of their own strength? Yeah, he already knew that. But that doesn't negate you're required to keep his commandments. You can't use a straw man argument of, well, we can never fully keep them without failing, and that gives you the right to not have to keep them. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. Scripturally speaking, that doesn't give you the right to throw his law aside, because you understand that there's no way you could fully keep it without failing once. So I hear that all the time. I used to hear that all the time, and I'm sorry, but that does not equal one another. Just because we're not perfect doesn't mean that we just give up and throw away his law. That's not how it works. And actually, the devil's deceived people into doing that. So now, when on Judgment Day, he's not going to have mercy on people that did that. And the devil's actually deceived people into using turning his mercy into license to sin, which you can find that in the book of Jude. Jude is clearly warning people about false teachers, about heretics, false shepherds that would turn his mercy, his favor, into license to sin, which again is the main doctrine in Christianity. Mainstream Christianity today is, well, his law was nailed at the cross, we can do whatever we want. What Jude warned has already happened. It's been fulfilled. Men crept in unawares. That's the reality of it. And mind you, Jude's book was written, what, Mom, 90 AD? Like thousands of years ago. And or my bad, I'm bad with math, maybe 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Okay. But the point is that Jude was warning us prophetically about something that has been fulfilled now. And So don't let people say to you, oh, well, we could never fully keep it. That means we don't have to keep it. That type of theology is not supported by the Bible. It's not. So, and if anything, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater at that point, and you're stomping on his blood. You're stomping on his mercy at that point. So, but anyway, let's see here. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really stood out. Obviously, it was talking about all these possessions Yahuwah is going to give them that they never earned, this and that, and he's warning them that not to forget him, don't get puffed up and prideful and start thinking you with your own hands have acquired you this and that. And
Can I say something about that?
go ahead.
I just Yahuwah is very much blessed me with medical knowledge, and I heard a wonderful sermon when I was learning on this very section. This what really is in here when people say, look at what I have done, look at what my mind has done, look at the millions that I have made because of my mind and my brain. That's the Nebuchadnezzar spirit. And truly, the truth of the matter is, if the Father had put one of our amino acids or one of our chromosomes in a different order, we would not be talking about the same thing at all. And I can't help but think of that when I'm reading this section. We do not accomplish any of this. It is his barakas and his mercy upon us. And I'll tell you, I have drawn blood from little babies and young children who were being tested for amino acid orders and chromosomal analysis. It's a humbling experience to see children that are lacking so much that need to be tested for these things. And, it's like, I just, as I'm reading this, and I'm just remembering, this is like the Nebuchadnezzar spirit. Look at the mighty Babylon that I have made, that my hands have done. And it wasn't until he acknowledged Yahuwah that he was made whole. And it's just, to me, this is a very important part of scripture for me. It's just a reminder that everything we have is from his hand. Yeah. Everything we know, everything is barakah. So that's all I want.
I don't even think it's Nebuchadnezzar's spirit that did that. I think there was another spirit in him. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to be honest here, according to his history, he wanted to be the next Nimrod. He before he came to Yahuwah, and you can check this historical fact here, he was quoted to say that he believed, and he's not the only one. I think Saddam Hussein had way later after him said this as well, that they believed that they were Nimrod reincarnated. Okay, so if they believe that, that means there's a spirit in them causing them to believe that. You see what I'm saying? So there's a spirit influencing them.
It was publicly stated that Saddam Hussein had said he thought he was the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted to rebuild the gardens. He wanted to do all, but you're still gonna have the same thing. I mean,
I'm gonna look. No, I want to look this up real quick because I remember, maybe not Saddam Hussein, but I remember there's something about Nebuchadnezzar with that. Let's see here, Nebuchadnezzar thought he was Nimrod reincarnated. What you have to understand too is that most of these kings thought themselves to be a representative of the God they worshiped. So what you got to understand is, in their pagan religions, you're a king basically while he's living is in place of that God. So For example, all the kings of Egypt thought they were the human representative of Osiris.
Okay,
See what I'm saying?
yes, I do.
Hence, vicar of Christ. Okay. The popes are not creating stuff out of thin air. Okay. They took stuff from Babylon, guys. They're not making up their own stuff. And funny enough, I don't usually like these websites, but even certain mystic Jewish people thought he was a reincarnation of Nimrod. This is funny. This is like, again, I'm not promoting this website, but I'm just saying, as far as research purposes, Chabad.org has like a whole article about Nebuchadnezzar being a type of Nimrod, and supposedly they believe. I want to make it clear that I don't believe, or none of us believe, but supposedly this website believes he's a reincarnation of Nimrod. So I just find that funny that even the mystic Jews believe that. So so that I just find that funny. But I'm pretty sure he himself, I could have swore seen it somewhere where Nimrod's own word, Nebuchadnezzar's own words was like he was Nimrod reborn, and he like and all that. But anyway, so if you want to look that up, you can look into interesting article about on Chabad.org about that, how they supposedly believe that. So there's all type of links out there though about this topic. About it says that inside abandoned Babylon built by Saddam Hussein, inside who thought he was the reincarnation of the ancient king Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, so we do know that at least Saddam Hussein would have believed in this whole garbage of reincarnation, all that. So I wouldn't find it hard to believe that Nebuchadnezzar would do the same, thinking that he was Nimrod reincarnated or whatever god they worshipped him as, like Marduk. Marduk is like another Baal. Okay, so they're worshiping Marduk, Dagon. Okay, so as far as proof, I can't give you proof, but just the fact that later on Saddam promotes that, I'm pretty sure Nebuchadnezzar did before he found Yahuwah, and Yahuwah calls him to repent and all that. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
What was I going to say? Okay, so with the whole concept of them worshiping, like, Pharaoh or the vicar of Christ, if their belief is that they are the they represent the deity that they serve, I'm curious as to when the first office of the Pope arose, but period, that would show that they believe that JC is the deity that they serve, that JC is God, not a different person, not like a different mighty one. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think this is the date that I'm sending in the chat. It would have started. From what I've researched, Mom, please correct me if I'm wrong. Constantine was the first official pope, right?
I hear them say that they believe Peter was.
Well, we're not talking about mythology. We're talking about history, proven history, like a physical pope. We're not talking about mythology. We're not talking about their doctrine. We're talking about physically the first pope, as far as I know, was Emperor Constantine. He actually created the quote unquote, for the most part, Catholic Church. He quote unquote at least popularized it to where the whole empire became Catholic. So he pretty much would be the first pope. So you have 333 AD. I find it interesting. 333. That's just a coincidence, right? Threes are multiples, 6, 6, 6, 6. So just find that interesting. But yeah, Constantine would have called himself the first ever pope. I think he was called Pontius Maximus. was one of his titles, and it continued on through that point. So every pope after Constantine believed that they were the representative of Christ, but their Christ is not the true Messiah of Scripture. So I do want to put that out there. They, even though to the public, they say, we believe in, Messiah of the Bible, they really don't. Like, Jesus Christ is basically a mask that Sol Invictus is who they really serve. And Sol Invictus is who Constantine at his death served. There's coins that show the sun god on his money, on his seal, Sol Invictus. So in private, that's who they worship. Now out to the public, the Sol Invictus or Apollo gets the makeover of Jesus Christ and Caesar Borgia. So that becomes a front for the deity, and the whole world worships this Jesus Christ, not realizing that this Jesus Christ is basically Baal in a mask. Essentially is what it is. It's Baal worship. The whole religion of it's basically Mystery Babylon religion is what Catholicism is. And many other people have researched and found this out too. I'm not saying anything new. The people like Alexander Hislop have researched this. People like, Kevin Costner, or I forget, my bad, not Kevin Costner, CJ Coster, another researcher, found the same thing out, came to the same conclusions that Alexander Hislop. Okay, so this is nothing new. Like, this is pretty much well known at this point that they're as far as spiritually speaking, their religion is a Babylonian religion, and they give it a Christian what's it called, Mom, when you go to the hairdresser and you get
they give it a facelift.
Yeah, facelift.
Mhm.
They gave the Babylon mystery religion a Christianese facelift. So yes, they claim to serve JC, but the name JC and the identity JC did not even exist until like the 1800s of the Middle Ages or whatever, or after the Middle Ages. So they were worshiping Sol Invictus way before they started claiming to worship this Christ. Okay, so that's what people don't understand. So Jesus Christ is like, it's kind of like in the occult, right? You have the esoteric meaning, exoteric meaning. They give the exoteric identity of their deity as so-called Jesus Christ. So the whole world thinks that they serve the Messiah of the Bible, right? When in actuality, in the esoteric, behind closed doors, they worship Baal, they worship the sun god. And so, yeah, go ahead, brother Yahusha.
Well, even with Asus, you can see that they worship Baal just by Asus being an actual name of Nimrod, or Asus of the Gauls, which I wonder if that's why they wiped out. Because if you try to, there's limited information on that, with the Gauls, very limited information on who they worshipped. I mean, we do have that information, but it's very limited. It's like they wiped out their history. I wonder if that's why they tried to hide it.
Yeah. Well, what also could have happened too was they could have tried to wipe out any remnants of it. I wonder if the Roman Empire, I would like to look into this, because Gaul is Galatia, right? So I wonder if the Roman Empire attacked the Galatian assembly, started or even infiltrated the Galatian assembly, hence why Paul's like, you're backpedaling, guys, what the heck are you doing? And then they probably, killed the Gauls and took their mighty ones. And this is known as the concept of conquest. So, like, if you research in history, right, what happens when a nation conquers another nation? They take their gods. It's just, that's basic history. Even American history will teach you that. The Romans take over the Greeks. What happens? So now they worship Zeus, but they call Zeus Jupiter. you can see it all throughout history. It's no different. So yeah, I mean, to me, it was very obvious that this deity the Catholics served was not Yahusha a while ago. When I started really looking into it, just their artwork, the sun symbol behind the head, they always have these like nimbuses and these halos in their artwork. And when you research where the halo comes from, sun god worship, it's very obvious what the hierarchy of that religion worships. Where it gets confusing is you got these people that don't know better. You got a lot of the clergy, and they just don't know what the heck they're worshiping. I would liken a lot of the people, well-meaning people in Catholicism, as kind of like, the Samaritan woman that just didn't know what the heck she was worshiping. Like, Yahusha's like, you worship what you don't know, and we worship what we do know, in that type of concept. Like, the Samaritans, you can look it up too in the Tanakh time period. The Samaritans were like trying to worship Yahuwah and worship Baal at the same time. They were like not wanting to give up. They were not wanting to give up their paganism. And so, you have a lot of that going on with Christianity, of like just a lot of confusion. They don't know who they really worship, and all that. But yeah, there you can definitely see the Baal worship in the Catholicism. Is the easiest sect of Christianity to see the Baal worship in. If you don't see it in there, then Yahuwah is just not opening your eyes, because I mean, it's everywhere. It's in the artwork. It's in it's like it's everywhere. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
So their conquering of the Gauls would have been even before Yahusha was born. So Asus would have been one of their deities even before Yahusha stepped onto the scene, or at least physically stepped onto the scene.
Interesting.
So they weren't inserting anything new that wasn't already known.
Makes sense. And by the way, Jesus, if you look at the IHS, a lot of people don't realize this, but out of the IHS Jesuit symbol, you can actually get like, Isis, Horus, Set. Like you can actually get like the Babylonian Trinity even in the IHS symbol for the Jesuit order. They try to say that means, well, I think they also believe it means Iesu something else. Like they try to make it look like it's referring to so-called Jesus, like with their symbol. They do because I think they do, like, supposedly it was that's what they tell the public is supposedly stands for is Jesus H Christ or whatever, I forget. But
well, wouldn't Isis, Horus, and Set, wouldn't that be the Egyptian version of the Trinity?
Yeah, it would, because Set was the brother of Osiris.
So technically it would be Jesus. It would be Asus, Tutatis, and Tyrannus.
Yeah. So the Catholic Church tries to say that anagram means, like, I don't even know. They could never explain to the people what the H stand for. Like they would try to say Jesus H something, or Jesus H Christ. They would try to say, but they could never explain to people why what the H was, what the middle acronym was. So yeah, it's definitely more realistically Isis, Horus, and then Set is the more realistic meaning of that anagram that they have on their logo. But yeah, it's the Egyptian Trinity, which is basically Egyptian recycled form of the Babylonian, because Horus would have been Tammuz in the Babylonian religion. Osiris would have been, Nimrod. Isis would have been Semiramis. So it's really the same thing. It's really just recycled after the Tower of Babel. So basically, for people that are like really confused right now, all you got to really understand is after the Tower of Babel, according to traditional history and traditions, even in the Jewish lore today, you would have had 70 or 72 languages and nations from the Tower of Babel. So if you think about it, Baal, right, who's the guy that wanted to get the Tower of Babel built, there's going to be 70 something languages that call him different names. So essentially what happened was the whole world still worshipped him, right, after the Tower of Babel, but in different nations and different languages. So the Greeks had their own version of him. The Egyptians had their own version. The Sumerians had their own version. The Assyrians had their own version. So you have like all these different names for the same guy. That's why really Yahuwah just lumped it up, and said, Israel went away and followed the Baals, plural. Baalim, plural. Why? Because there's many versions of him, but it's the same guy. It's the same guy, and it's the same idol that the whole world, followed after it, right after the flood. So that's why you see in scripture it talks about the Baalim and the Ashtaroth and the Asherah poles and all that, because those are the two main idols Israel goes after among the nations, because the nations, that's who they're serving. They're serving really the same two people in every religion. And I don't care what man-made religion you claim. And this is not to be offensive, but I'm just being honest, being transparent. Every man-made religion serves them. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what religion you serve. You could even be Muslim and you don't realize you're serving them. Okay, the Kaaba stone. Okay, that according to Acts 19, the object that fell from heaven, right? According to Muslim mythology, this is not my opinion, this is what they believe. They believe that Kaaba stone fell out of heaven. Okay, so according to Acts 19, that stone belongs to Diana of the Ephesians. So this is what people don't know, like ignorantly, unwillingly don't know. So they're blindly falling after these false man-made religions. And I know there's a lot of well-meaning Muslims I've met, but I'm just letting you guys know you're being deceived. You're worshiping Baal. You're worshiping Ashtaroth. Okay, it's very clear. You look at the symbol of your religion. Okay, the Eastern Star. Okay, the crescent moon even. The crescent moon was a symbol for Isis, for Ashtaroth, for Ishtar. Okay. So even if you go into the symbol of the religion you're a part of, you can see it. It's just that people have been blinded to it. And I believe that's part of the prophecy we talked about the other day, or read about the other day in Deuteronomy 4, right, Mom? Doesn't it say that when Israel gets dispersed, they're going to worship, gods of wood, stone. Just so happens, what is a cross made out of? Wood. And what's the Kaaba made out of? Stone. Interesting. I find that a little interesting, because if you look at Christianity and Islam, right, they population-wise, I've looked at this, those two so-called monotheistic religions make up like a good portion of the world. So I just find that interesting. But anyway, I apologize for that rabbit trail, but just to give you guys the context we're talking about here. So basically, to fully understand what me and Brother Yahusha were kind of like midrashing about here, is you really got to go back to the Tower of Babel to fully understand what we're talking about. You have to go back to the Tower of Babel, and you got to understand the concept of conquest, war and conquest. Whenever you take over a nation, you usually, in their cultures, they would take over their religion and then make it theirs. So hence why you got this Jesus deity that, the Romans took over, gave them their own name or own version of it. Really, Jesus, Isis and Jesus is not too far from one another. They're just, adding a couple letters. Okay. So it's very plausible and actually makes sense that they would do that. And I mean, there's a link here I came across. Yahuwah willing, I'm gonna try to remember to put in the description. this gives you a little bit of what me and Brother Yahusha was talking about, as far as the history of this. And it seems like they took over the Gauls and completely, wiped off their memory. And it seems like this Isis deity also seems to identify with Tutates and with Mercury. Or no, my bad. The other one is Mercury. So Isis seems to be Mars. Who also, according to tradition, is identified with Mars. Satan. That's kind of interesting that, just so happens. Because I was reading the other day, I was looking up some interesting traditions that, that the rabbis believed about Satan. And they actually, I forget what link I was on, but it showed that in Jewish tradition, they believed Satan, aka Samael, was identified with the deity of Mars. So I just found that interesting. So anyway, but
interesting. In the next 50 years, what scientists have planned for NASA
yeah,
is instead of the moon, they're now wanting to go to Mars.
yeah, I believe that's all.
That's like the next on the
I believe
stupid NASA agenda
I believe it's all about Satan worship. I think they're setting up a deception about Mars where they're going to make it look like they give that there's life on Mars and there's aliens on Mars, and somehow that's going to tie into when the beast is coming. I think there's something about that, but that's just speculation on my part. But the bigger point is that the deity of Mars is equated with supposedly Isis of the Gauls, which I find it interesting because Isis of the Gauls is Nimrod, and Mars is identified with Satan in Jewish tradition. So just find that interesting, things that make you go, So, that's kind of interesting because Mars is the god of war. The reason why the rabbinic people would, they would associate Mars of the Roman lore with Satan is because, according to extra biblical texts, Satan revealed war to mankind. He taught weapons of war, in the pre-flood era. And so I can see why the rabbis would associate Godriel or Satan with Mars. Kind of makes sense to me because Mars is the Roman god of war. He's, and I believe that's the actual deities that this evil nation was actually established with. If you look at the Capitol building today, those are the graven images that are there. Is Mars and I think Minerva or Ninurta, I forget how to pronounce the other one, but supposedly those are the two pagan deities that are put outside the Capitol building of DC. So that kind of puts into perspective, war and the war on terror, why we're always at war with other nations, and all that. But anyway, I wasn't trying to, my bad about that. I wasn't trying to go into a big, huge thing, but I think it's important to know about that and to know about where this whole, thing comes from. And we kind of got on this topic because we were talking about how Nebuchadnezzar and how Saddam Hussein thought he was crazy, thought himself to be a reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, and probably Nebuchadnezzar thought the same about himself, that he was a reincarnation of Nimrod. So a lot of these kings believed in that because they're in a pagan world. A lot of them believed in that. So anyway, trying to get back on topic here. Mom, would you like to read chapter 9? Let me and I think we got Sister Milka in here.
Here, O Yashrael, you are now about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations.
Can't hear your mom. It's very far away.
You might have to go a little closer to me.
Like doing a couple of these things.
Hold on.
Yeah. Your work area over here.
Actually, you know what? Stay where you are on your bed, Mom, and just move the phone to you. It's just sometimes easier.
Okay. Hear, O Yashrael, you are now about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities,
that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall, Anakites. You know about them and have heard it said, who can stand up against the Anakites? But be assured today that Yahuwah, your Elohim, is the one who goes ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them quickly, as Yahuwah has promised you. After Yahuwah, your Elohim, has driven them out before you, do not say to yourselves, Yahuwah has brought me here to take possession of this land because of my righteousness. No, it is on account of the wickedness of these nations that Yahuwah is going to drive them out before you. It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you are going in to take possession of their land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations. Yahuwah, your Elohim, will drive them out before you to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that Yahuwah, your Elohim, is giving you this good land to possess. For you are a stiff-necked people. Remember this and never forget how you provoked Yahuwah, your Elohim, to anger in the desert. From the day you left Egypt until you arrived here, you have been rebellious against Yahuwah. At Horeb, you aroused Yahuwah's wrath so that he was angry enough to destroy you. When I went up on the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that Yahuwah had made with you, I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I ate no bread and drank no water. Yahuwah gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of Elohim. On them were all the commandments Yahuwah proclaimed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. At the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, Yahuwah gave me the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. Then Yahuwah told me, go down from here at once, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have turned away quickly from what I commanded them and have made a cast idol for themselves. And Yahuwah said to me, I have seen this people, and they are a stiff-necked people indeed. Let me alone, so that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven, and I will make you into a nation stronger and more numerous than they. So I turned and went down from the mountain while it was ablaze with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my hands. When I looked, I saw that you had sinned against Yahuwah, your Elohim. You had made for yourselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way that Yahuwah had commanded you. So I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my hands, breaking them to pieces before your eyes. Then once again I fell prostrate before Yahuwah. For 40 days and 40 nights I ate no bread and drank no water, because of all the sin you had committed, doing what was evil in Yahuwah's sight, and so provoking him to anger. I feared the anger and wrath of Yahuwah, for he was angry enough with you to destroy you. But again, Yahuwah listened to me, and Yahuwah was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him. But at that time, I prayed for Aaron too. Also, I took that sinful thing of yours, the calf you had made, and burned it in the fire. Then I crushed it and ground it to powder as fine as dust, and threw the dust into a stream that flowed down the mountain. You also made Yahuwah angry at Taberah, at Massa, and at Kibrot, Hatarah, Hatavah. And when Yahuwah sent you out from Kadesh Barnea, he said, go up and take possession of the land I have given you, but you rebelled against the command of Yahuwah your Elohim. You did not trust him or obey him. You have been rebellious against Yahuwah ever since I have known you. I lay prostrate before Yahuwah those 40 days and 40 nights because Yahuwah had said he would destroy you. I prayed to Yahuwah and said, O sovereign master, do not destroy your people, your own inheritance that you redeemed by your great power and brought out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Remember your servants Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Overlook the stubbornness of this people, their wickedness and their sin. Otherwise, the country from which you brought us will say, because Yahuwah was not able to take them into the land he had promised them, and because he hated them, he brought them out to put them to death in the desert. But they are your people, your inheritance that you brought out by your great power and your outstretched arm. Yep. I'm just trying to think if there's anything in particular that's standing out at me. Just the fact, and I know all of us know this, it's just something to mention, how Moshe was really used, into that intercessory way, because without him, truly, the Israelites would have been smitten, would have been smote right then and there. And Moshe stood up as that intercessory, between them and the Father. Just to mention that.
And he actually had the ear of Yahuwah,
Yes.
versus a lot of other people. Don't think we ever see anyone again where they're so close to Yahuwah, where they can actually tell him, no, don't wipe these people out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And I love when we get to the end of this book and we're sort of reprising things, and a lot of people will focus on the sin that happened with Moshe, why he was not allowed into the promised land. But truly, even as he left this life, he was highly esteemed by the Father. And we see that because in the Brit Hadashah, he was one of the ones that Yahusha brought up on the mountain of transfiguration. We believe he's one of the messengers in the end of time. He truly did not lose his standing with the Father. He left his life highly esteemed. The point is that if our Father is who we know and believe that he is, righteous, set apart, awesome Father, he had to punish him. He could not let that go, especially with what Moshe was striking. And it was not just a case of disobedience. And he had to do that. But I honestly feel that even with all of that, his mercy was still there because he at least allowed Moshe to see the land. He allowed him to look upon it. You know, I think it would have been really horrible if he wasn't even able to see all those years what he was working for, all those years when serving Yahuwah to bring them to that place. And I really do feel that that was an act of mercy, allowing him to at least see it, you know, if not to enter into it. But anyway.
Yeah, everyone wants to put the blame on Masha until they look at the whole story, how he was basically dealing with nagging children.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the old saying, yeah, I work with children. That's, you know, you could kind of relate to Masha when you got people at the job that
Pushing his buttons.
pushing your buttons until you eventually break.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead, brother Yusha.
It's interesting that he was told to strike the rock
Yeah.
the first time. The second time
No, you're
he
right.
wasn't, and it reminds me of Hebrews 6:6, where it says, "And having fallen away to renew them." Or wait, let me go back. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened, having tasted of the heavenly gift, and become partakers of the set apart Ruach, and having tasted the true word of Yahuwah and powerful deeds, the age to come, and having fallen away, to renew them again to repentance, since they execute again for themselves the Son of Yahuwah and hold him up to contempt. So it's almost like he was being equated to, you know, the first time he was told to, you know, to symbolize Yahusha being executed or being, you know, being struck. The second time, you know, there is no striking Yahusha a second time.
That's right.
You're forgiven that first time, but the second time.
Yep.
What's that?
That I just said that's true. That's right.
Verse 24 was interesting. I'm not sure what this could entail, but the LXX reads, "You were disobedient in the things relating to Yahuwah from the day in which he became known to you," versus the Masoretic, "Whereas you have been rebellious against Yahuwah from the day that I knew you." So LXX says from the day that you came to know Yahuwah, and the Masoretic from the day that Masha knew the people.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that unless they're trying to hint that at some point Yahuwah was revealed to them, like in a physical sense, like you had the word come down, which I could kind of see. At some point, you know, they would have had to see him, you know, in the tabernacle, or how, you know, how in scripture it will say, you know, his esteem came out of the pillar of fire or the pillar of the cloud and entered the tabernacle. So I would assume the physical image of Yahuwah would have been revealed at some point to them. They might have not known him as the word, but they would have known him as, like, you know, the form of Yahuwah. Kind of similar to how Jacob, when he wrestled with Yahusha, he said, you know, I've seen the form of Alua. So that's the only thing I can make out of the LXX version of that verse, is that it seems to pinpoint to a certain possible event Yahuwah being revealed to them. Because, right, Mom, like at the Ten Commandments, they didn't see him. They were afar off.
No.
They were all the way, at the bottom of the mountain.
Right.
There's no way they would have, in a physical, like, eye, face to face type of thing. He was not revealed to them at Mount Sinai. They heard his voice, but they did not see him. So maybe it's talking about that. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting. I saw some interesting.
Yeah,
stuff.
possibly.
Oh, go ahead, bro.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, possibly.
Yeah, I found something interesting. I think it's in verse 3 here. I was looking at the Targum in verse 3 of chapter 9, and I found something very interesting. In both the Onkelos and the Pseudo-Jonathan Targums, they both agree and have it, instead of it saying Yahuwah is a consuming fire, it says the word of Yahuwah is a consuming fire, which would actually point back to the Brit Hadashah and how Shaul talks about, our Alua is a consuming fire and all that. So I found that interesting. Here, I think I sent this screenshot of me. You see here what it literally verbatim what he says here. Know therefore today that Yahuwah your Alua, whose esteemed splendor goes before you, whose word is a consuming fire, will destroy them and drive them out before you, so shall you drive them out and destroy them quickly, as Yahuwah your Alua has said to you. So that's the Jonathan one. Here, let me look at the Shields, what I should have on my sword here. Share screen. But know this day that the word of Yahuwah your Alua, he it is who goes over before you, he who is a burning fire. He will consume them. He will break them down before you. You will soon drive them out, as Yahuwah has told you. Yeah, I definitely agree with the Onkelos one the best for that verse. So it's very interesting because that's showing that Yahusha is Yahuwah there and that he's a consuming fire. So when Paul, which I would believe Paul is aware of these targums because he's a former Pharisee, he's a former rabbi. In their traditions, I'm pretty sure they would have orally, maybe not written down, had these targums of the Torah, but at least had these orally passed down. I'm pretty sure Paul understands the language of that, and I think it was very intentional that Paul said, our Alua is a consuming fire. And when you look out throughout all of Paul's letters, he is referring to Yahusha as that Elohim, that Alua. So to me, it's a very interesting connection there. I would actually like to look up that verse in Hebrews and see what the context of the whole chapter is. And our fire verse this is Hebrews 12:29. So, okay. Okay, this chapter I can't really prove it, but anyway, just thought I would look into it. Okay. Anyway, never mind. But just found that interesting from the Targum that it equates the word of Yahuwah as the consuming fire being mentioned. So, other than that, I can't really think of anything else to bring up other than, oh, Mom, how in Revelations it talks about how who can stand against the beast and all that,
Yeah.
who can make war with him.
Yeah, yeah.
I find it interesting. The same thing is being said about the Anakites. It says here
Yeah, right.
in Deuteronomy 9, verse 2, a people great and tall, sons of the Anakim, so descendants of Anak, whom you know, and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak. So to me, that's kind of interesting. And I know people will be like, so, okay, Doug, so what's the comparison between them and the beast? Well, if the beast is who we think he is, who the identity of the beast, who we believe it is, Nimrod at some point began to be a Gibborim, a giant. So it's kind of interesting that these Anakim giants, the same thing is being said about them. Who can stand against them? Who can make war with them? So I just find that interesting, and all that too. I just find that a little interesting there. And I think there's a minor difference in the Septuagint because the Masoretic says great and tall. I forget if the Septuagint says something else other than just tall. If it talks about their stature, their strength. Let me just see here. So I know that sometimes the Septuagint would differ in the wording about the Anakites. Not just great and tall, but great and many. Mazarites, why you gotta leave stuff out like that? Oh, that's great. Many is in the verse. So many would mean they are numerous. They have a huge population, To me, that's kind of important. So that's a huge difference in Deuteronomy, I think 9 verse 2 it was. And let's see here what we got. Thrust them out before you. So this is talking about the conquest of the land of Canaan. So again, Yahuwah is warning them not to get puffed up. Don't think because of your own righteousness, Yahuwah is doing this. So basically, Yahuwah is saying it has nothing to do with you. Why I'm bringing you guys in here. It has to do with the covenant I made with your ancestors, basically. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I'm looking at the I went back to where Nimrod is began to be a giant. This word always it always interests me. It's kalal. It can mean begin, but it can also mean to profane, defile, pollute, to profane oneself. It can also mean to play the flute. And then I went to the AHLB. What is it at? BV. It can mean to begin or to pierce. The spot to be drilled is first scored to make an indentation to accept the drill. And the beginning of the drilling is the most difficult as the drill can easily slip out. But it can also mean to make something common that is meant to be set apart for a special function. And I know it's just midrash, as far as whether, Nimrod was originally used for, whether he was originally a servant of Yahuwah or not. And we don't really have any proof on that. But if
Yeah.
that was the case, this word would be interesting because this word would seem to imply that something what was supposed to be set apart is now made common, which, would really kind of relate him to Satan. If Satan really truly was like, the a high up in Yahuwah's kingdom, a worshiper, someone that had a lot of rank and power, and then all of a sudden, he lost all that. It would kind of equate, the story of Nimrod to the story of Satan.
Interesting. Yeah. Even though we don't have proof of it, I would agree, and Satan definitely did have some type of rank. The fact that Michael did not accuse him of anything when he had every right to, and he did not rail an accusation against him, I definitely don't think it's out of respect for the person of Satan, but for what type of authority he originally had. And I definitely think that possibly Satan and Michael originally were neck and neck in authority originally in heaven.
I could definitely see that. I could definitely see that. Even though Satan is clearly like no longer has his, he's clearly not on Yahuwah's side. He's clearly has no way of coming back. He's clearly our enemy. But the same could be said of Shaul, King Shaul. He lost his kingship. He lost his kingdom. The Ruach departed from him. Clearly, Yahuwah was not with him, and yet at the same time, Daud still would not touch him. He still said, like, I won't touch Yahuwah's anointed. Kind of like the same. I can see the same concept. Only I would not. I would not personally call Satan Yahuwah's anointed, but I can kind of see where why Michael wouldn't touch him out of respect.
Yeah, and if our theory about it, going based on what we have.
Someone's in the waiting room.
Oh, thank you, bro. Yeah, I think that's Sister Sally. Yeah, piggybacking off your just off of your point here. I do think that Scripture might not talk about it, but there's a lot of tradition about what Satan originally was, and if technically the way I look at what Scripture talks about classes of angels, if he was a seraphim, they're pretty high on the list. If you look at any tradition, them and the cherubs are kind of like neck and neck. And so that's why I kind of have the opinion I have. If Satan was a seraph and Michael's a cherub, both of them are going to be very high on the list. So, I definitely think Satan had a high position. The fact that Yahuwah gave him flutes, gave him, if there's any truth to how the Masoretic renders Ezekiel 28 about, pipes were prepared in you, this and that, and the flute and all that, technically he would be leading worship in heaven. What I find interesting too is that supposedly the seraphim, a lot of the traditions about certain seraphim in even the Jewish side seems to lead to that seraphim could be choir masters in heaven. So I do see there's definitely a lot of tradition. There's definitely a lot of tradition about it.
Yeah.
Hold on, I think she got it.
I can carry this. I can carry that for you.
Sorry about that. We had a little bit of background noise there. But go ahead, brother. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh no, sorry. I said everything.
Yeah, so that's kind of people. They want to. I can give them some resources on the traditions I'm talking about Gabriel, Satan, Samael, whatever you want to call them. But there's definitely hints to him, even in those traditions, being very high ranked and very, having a high office before he fell. And I think it makes sense to why, if you respect someone's office, you're you're really not respecting the person, you're just respecting the rank they used to have. And it kind of makes sense, like what we said about Michael, why he would do what he did. He let Yahuwah rebuke him rather than he rebuking him. And so anyway, but yeah, there's a lot of traditions about that. Even the Book of Enoch, I think, puts on Michael's side of the argument. He's, I think, identified as one of the 4 living creatures. So Michael's very high up. If the Book of Enoch is scripture and it's legitimate, then we would have to accept he's one of those 4 living creatures, praising Yahuwah up there in heaven. So, along with, I forget the other guys. I think it's Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel, I think. And there's even assumptions that I personally, I'm not preaching this, it's not doctrine, but I personally believe Michael and Gabriel are the 2 cherubs that guarded the tree of life, with Yahusha possibly in between them, the sword. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
I wonder if Satan has a counterfeit. I know it's a little bit off topic, but I wonder if Satan has a counterfeit of the 4 living creatures. This is thought.
Possibly, yeah. I think of his kingdom, he would definitely have certain individuals that I think he would definitely want to give them high rank. Sam Yaza seemed very high ranked. Azazel seemed very high ranked. Those 2 guys, I would compare them to Michael and Gabriel. And then I forget the other watchers that would have fell. Plus, we don't know the names of the 1/3. A lot of people mistaken the watchers as part of the 1/3, but they're a separate group. So we don't even know the names of the 1/3 that fell with him. He could have very high ranked seraphim, Ophanim, cherubim with him as part of his army. We don't know. We have no idea.
If more than 1/3, if more than 1/3 fell, then that concept of the remnant, like they say that only, I've heard people like equate the remnant to being those, or the people that make it into the kingdom being the ones that replace that 1/3. But if more than 1/3 fell, then it's not really a valid concept,
Yeah, and we don't know what the number of stars that were in heaven. They're innumerable, so it's kind of hard to, compare that to the 1/3 of, the remnant of Yashrael, supposedly replacing them. Technically Yashrael can be numbered. The angels are not really numbered. They're not. There's like, we only know of about I would say a very small portion of the number of the messengers in heaven. It's very hard to equate the 2 as the same thing. Like that idea that the remnant who will be saved is going to replace the 1/3 that fell. Yeah, the problem, like you said, is not only 1/3 fell. See, a lot of people that probably have that idea don't understand these 200 watchers were separate from that 1/3. So
another thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just going to say another thing would be that Yahuwah doesn't make the promise that Yashrael would be as new. He said that Yashrael would be as numerous as the stars. He didn't say Yashrael would be as numerous as the stars that fell.
Yeah. Which, if we're going to compare those 2 together as the same thing, like, technically Yashrael would be innumerable then, rather than just a remnant. Which I do believe in heaven, you're not just going to have a remnant. I think that's taken out of context of itself. Like, a lot of people say only a remnant's going to be saved, only a remnant. Yeah, it says a remnant's going to be saved, but it also shows that there's a mixed multitude in heaven. And that can't be numbered. So for that to only be limited to the remnant of the end times, I don't think that you can equate it as that. You can equate something innumerable as a remnant. So I think a lot of people are misunderstanding those that are going to be saved in the end times, the remnant that's going to be saved in the end times with all of Yashrel's that's going to be in the kingdom, if that makes any sense. Because we also have to remember too, there's two resurrections. So, like, what I mean is that remnant that Paul's talking about in Romans, he's talking about the remnants that will be there at the end of the age. He's not saying only a remnant is going to be in the kingdom, because then you got to throw out all the patriarchs. You know what I'm saying? So it's important to keep it in context when it's talking about only a remnant. Okay. I've seen people take a extreme literal interpretation to that, and I know what Brother Yahush is talking about. Some people out there believe that it's only a remnant, it's only going to be a remnant, and that's it. If that's the case, there's no purpose for the nations who are left over in the millennium, mind you, Gentiles, the non-believers who Yahuwah showed favor to have them grafted in the millennium. So you got to even add the number of that remnant. It starts expanding even during the millennium. You know what I'm saying? Like the family of Egypt, if they don't come up, if these nations don't come up who fought against Israel, you got to add those numbers there. It can't be just a remnant. So what I would say is, like, this is what I mean by, like, always talking about, like, rightly dividing the word. So when Paul's talking about a remnant, he's talking about the remnant of the end of the age. He's talking about the remnant that are those that are there before Messiah comes are going to be saved. He's not talking about for all time, it will only be a remnant. Because if that's the case, he would be going against prophecy that talks about the millennium. He would be going against John in Revelations. So I think people are taking that concept to the extreme. And that's just my opinion. But I think, in the new heaven, new earth, you're going to have more than just a remnant. You're going to have an innumerable number of people. And like Brother Yahusha said, that was Yahuwah's promise to Abraham. He didn't say that you're only going to have a remnant. He said your seed is going to be like the angels, like the stars, okay, which can't be counted. So for that promise to be fulfilled, it can't be just only a remnant forever. So when Paul's talking about only a remnant, only a remnant, only a remnant, we have to understand, though, like, context of that remnant. When is that remnant being saved? That remnant is being saved at the end of the age. So that remnant is being talked about is at a specific time period. He's not saying that there's only going to be a remnant forever in heaven. So that's what I mean by it's important to use context. Because Paul's talking about the end of the age. Every time he talks about that remnant, or that not all of Israel's Israel, he's talking about the end of the age. He's talking about Messiah's return. He's not talking about the millennium. He's not talking about, the new heaven, new earth. So that's just something to keep in mind too, when prophecy is talking about a remnant of Israel is going to be saved. The day of redemption is the same day as the day of Yahuwah. So that's also what we got to realize about prophecy. So just something to keep in mind, because I used to think that too, first coming into Torah, but then you start realizing, wait a minute, Yahuwah's giving Gentiles the chance to be grafted in even after the end of the age, going into the millennium. So how can it only be a remnant even in the millennium? Even there, that's a flaw in that. And then you go into the new heaven, new earth, it seems like it's much more than a remnant, because even preceding the new heaven, new earth, you have a multitude. What does it say, Mom? Can't be numbered.
Right.
It even says in Revelation. So that can't be considered a remnant. You know what I'm saying? A remnant's a remnant. A remnant means a small portion. So even if we look at what the word remnant means, so we have to. All I'm trying to say is, brothers and sisters, we got to take
stuff in context. You can't just take one verse and then run with it. We got to take stuff in context, because a lot of times when it talks about the remnant of Israel and the remnant's going to be saved, it's most likely it's talking about the end of the age. Most likely it's talking about the second coming. And that's usually what it's talking about, almost like I would say 90% of the time. So that's just something to keep in mind. But anyway. So yeah. And by the way, what I was talking about with the millennium, how the millennium disposes that whole only a remnant. Just wanted to give you guys the scripture here. It's Zechariah 14. Let me just read that for you guys, just to show you proof of what I'm saying here. Okay, let's go to Zechariah here. I'll read in my ESV here even. Let's see. It's page 1018 in my Bible. Okay, so just show you guys what I'm talking about real quick. So let's see here. So here we go. So Zechariah 14, last chapter here. So the coming of the day of Yahuwah, aka the day of his wrath, right? Okay. So it says, on that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost. There shall be a unique day which is known to Yahuwah, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. On that day living water shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in the summer as in winter. And Yahuwah will be king over all the earth. On that day, Yahuwah will be one and his name one. The whole land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, but Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site from the gate of Benjamin to the former gate. Okay, yada, 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 yada. Okay, let me see here. Let me jump down here to verse 16. So verse 16 of Zechariah 14 says, then everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King Yahuwah of armies and to keep the Feast of Booths. And if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King Yahuwah of armies, there will be no rain on them. And if the family of Egypt does not go up to present themselves, then on them there will be no rain. Now the Septuagint makes it a lot worse of a punishment. Basically, they would be added to those that died in the day of Yahuwah's wrath. So the point, though, is here, right? If it's just a remnant and that's all there's ever going to be, why is Yahuwah giving Gentiles a chance to become part of his people? By the way, for you to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, you would have to be in covenant with him. You can't remain a pagan and start keeping his feasts. See what I'm saying? So he's basically giving these nations that he did not kill in the day of his wrath, in the millennium, he's giving them a chance to be grafted in. So that means that the fullness of the nations cannot even be fully fulfilled until this happens and the whole end happens, because obviously he's giving these, nations a chance to become part of his people. So again, that's important to take into account as well. So that's the reason I wanted to bring that up, to give proof of why I believe there's going to be much more than just a little remnant, in the new heaven, new earth, and all that, and in the millennium. So also my mom was telling me too, there, another point to bring up is there's also a difference between the bride and and just the body and the side. Right. So you have the bride, which is a minority group that's basically greatest in the kingdom, and then you have the rest of the people that are in the kingdom. So it's also important to understand that too.
Which is why the church teaches a very dangerous doctrine that the whole church is the bride.
Yeah.
That's an extremely dangerous doctrine to be preaching, to mislead people to believe if they're part of the church, they're the bride.
doesn't make any sense because
No, it
even in
doesn't.
Matthew 5, you can
Yeah.
clearly see that Yahusha is saying there's a greatest and least.
Yeah.
So,
The never rude. No,
so I don't know.
you
That's
find it. You find it.
anyway, so now what we're starting, we're at what? We're at Deuteronomy 10 now.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom, Sister Ronnie. So let me see here. I think we should get a new reader for Deuteronomy 10. Let me just turn there so I'm there. So you read, I read. Brother Dennis, would you like to read Deuteronomy chapter 10? He's unmuted, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna unmute myself.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see.
Let's see. Chapter 10. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. At that time, Yahweh said to me, "Do for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and you shall make yourself an ark of wood." And I write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood, used 2 tablets of stone like the first, and went up the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. And he wrote on the tablets according to the first writing, the 10 words which Yahweh had spoken to you in the mountain, from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. Then Yahweh gave them to me. And I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark which I had made, and they were there, as Yahweh commanded me. Now the children of Yisrael set out from the wells of Bnei Yakan to Masrah. Aharon died there, and he was buried there. And Eleazar, his son, became priest in his place. And there they set out to Gilgal, and from Gilgal to Yothabath, a land of rivers of water. And at that time, Yahuwah separated the tribe of Lewi to bear the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah, to stand before Yahuwah to serve him, and to Barak in his name to this day. Therefore, Lewi has no portion nor inheritance with his brothers. Yahuwah is his inheritance, as Yahuwah your Elohim promised him. And I stayed in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And Yahuwah heard me at that time also. And Yahuwah chose not to destroy you. And Yahuwah said to me, "Arise, go before the people to set out, and let them go in and possess the land which I swore to their fathers to give them." And now, Yisrael, what is Yahuwah your Elohim asking of you, but to fear Yahuwah your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, to guard commands of Yahuwah and his laws, which I command you today for your Tob. See, the Shemaims and the Shemaim of Shemaims belong to Yahuwah your Elohim. Also, the earth rich with all that is in it. Yahuwah delighted only in your fathers, to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, and harden your neck no more. For Yahweh your Elohim is Elohim of mighty ones, and master of masters, great Allah, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe. He executes right ruling for the fatherless and the widow, and he loves the stranger, giving him food and a garment. And you shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. Fear Yahweh your Elohim, serve him, and cling to him, and swear by his name. He is your praise. He is your Elohim, who has done for you these great and awesome deeds which your eyes have seen. Your fathers went down to Mitzrayim with 70 beings, and now Yahweh your Elohim has made you as numerous as the stars of the heavens, Shemayim.
Interesting. We were just talking about Yahuwah making them as numerous as the stars in the heavens.
I know. Yeah.
Verse 8, I really like because it shows, again, who's supposed to be baracking the people, not everyone. It says, Yahuwah set apart the tribe of Levi to carry out the Ark of the Covenant of Yahuwah, to stand before Yahuwah, to minister to him, and to barak in his name to this day. So, again, this is a reference back to the Aaronic baraka and who's supposed to be doing that. And the majority of the time, even just in general speaking, when there would be barakas pronounced over the children of Israel, it was always done by the Levites. Majority of the time. Majority of the time, it's not done by everyone; it's done by the Levites. So that's something I noticed that Yahuwah points out a lot, is who he chose to do that. Now you said 70 souls, right? This is a little controversial here in verse 22, because when you look at the different manuscripts and actually what happened back in Genesis, I think was it 48 or 47. I believe it's more than 70, if I'm not mistaken.
I always think it's something else. I was thinking the 70 of Joseph's family.
Yeah, it is, Mom, but it's not 70. That's
I
when
thought it was 70.
the Masoretic changes the number. When you and there's even issues with both overall when you look at all the verses. This is a big topic when you get into the Septuagint versus the Masoretic, is about how many souls went down to Egypt and all that. There's a let's see here. So it says some manuscripts will put a little footnote. I'm noticing the NHEB decided not to do that this time. It's very weird. So if I go to
The Septuagint would agree with the renewed covenant. The only issue is that, like you said, both have discrepancies, because the Masoretic, when it numbers them, even though it doesn't agree with the even though it doesn't agree with the renewed covenant, when you actually count them up, the amount that you count matches the number that is given. Versus the Septuagint will agree with the renewed covenant, but when you actually count up the people that are listed, it doesn't match the number that is given.
Yeah, there's a discrepancy. Let me see here. I remember looking at this article in times. How many souls went down
into Egypt. I think the discrepancy is like 72 versus 70, or I forget the exact number. But there's
I think the Septuagint says 72, but when you count it, it doesn't. When you actually count them, like it doesn't actually come up to that number.
yeah. Even GodQuestions.org has a whole, or no, hermeneutics.com. Did 70 or 75 people go down to Egypt with Jacob? Acts 7:14 states Joseph sent word and invited Jacob, his father, and all his relatives to come to him, 75 persons in all. This seems to contradict Deuteronomy 10:22, Exodus 1:5, and Genesis 46:27, which all say it was 70 persons. Well, actually, let me go down to that because I think the Septuagint of those other two verses actually agree. The one that's in error is the one we're looking at, is Deuteronomy 10:22. From what I remember looking into, it's because 5 of them died. And I'm not promoting this specific book that talks about it, but I'm saying that there's Hebraic traditions that the reason the 5 get minus later on is because supposedly 5 died in Egypt and 70 only came back. 75 went into Egypt, 70 only came back. So I don't know if you guys ever heard about that, but yeah, there's a certain literature out there that I definitely don't consider scripture, but as far as a historical citation, it seems like that's where the disparagement comes from. You had 4 or 5 of that family die in Egypt, supposedly. So, or let me see here. I think there's even commentaries that talk about it. Supposedly 5's not accounted for. I think some commentaries will even say this, the reason it says 70 instead of 75 is because they're not counting the children or whatever. I don't know. There's multiple theories on why.
It breaks it down interestingly. It
Yeah.
says 66 with the 2 sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family which went to
Let's see
Egypt
here.
were 70 in all.
Yeah. So you go to Genesis 46:27. The problem seems to be in Deuteronomy 10:22, because if you look at the other places in the Septuagint, it says 75. It does. It has it correct. Masoretic does not. Masoretic in Genesis 46:27 says 70. Septuagint says 75, which agrees with Acts. So this is where it gets funny, because you have either one of the two things, is that extra biblical book is telling the truth, or these other commentators are telling the truth about the 5 children are just not counted. They're just, which would give you 70. 70 minus 75 is 5. So there has to be a reason behind it, other than they're just messing around and messing with one verse for no reason. You see what I'm saying,
Yeah,
Mom?
I do.
It says 75 right here in the LXX, which the book of Acts is 75, not 70. So the Masoretic, for whatever reason, decides to change it. So, and again, Exodus 1:5 in the LXX, 75. So again, the Masoretic changed that to 70 in that verse.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
So I think what happened was the Masoretes thought they were doing something, and they tried to fix the verses to all say 70. They do that sometimes. I've seen the Masoretic text change things that don't need to be changed, and they think they're fixing contradictions or something. They think they know better than Yahuwah's own word, and they're changing things just to change them. And so in Exodus 1:5 in the LXX, it has 75, and Genesis 46:27 also has 75. Where how many souls of Jacob's lineage went down to went down into Egypt, which also agrees with Acts 7:14. So anyway, go ahead, brother Yahusha.
No, old hand.
Yeah, so like I said, The source I'm citing from, I'm not saying it's scripture, but there are extra biblical traditions that supposedly there were something, supposedly the 5 got discounted somewhere. Somehow they just didn't count the 5 that were the children. So
I was kind of making a connection that obviously is not a connection. I was thinking of how in the Brit Hadashah, Yahusha had 70 disciples that went out from him to, to spread the good news and whatnot. So there was that number other than the 12, he had other disciples. And I remember seeing 70 of them.
what
went out.
would have been a connection is if the number was 72, but
Yeah.
but yeah, according to this extra biblical tradition, it doesn't. The reason I'm citing it, it does agree with LXX, and it talks about. Let's see here if says. Yeah, it says supposedly 5 died in Egypt, is according to this extra biblical text. So supposedly 5 of the
Alright.
75 died in Egypt. Do I know it's true or not? I really don't know because it's an extra biblical text that I don't consider to be scripture. As far as historical, it could be historically true. It could not be historically true. I really don't know. Can't really say. But it could explain why you have later on in Deuteronomy, they're counted as 70 instead of 75. I don't know. So, but that's what it's saying. And just to correct myself, it's not saying the children died. So sorry about that. I misspoke. It's just saying that basically the text just says, let's see, going back to it, says, and all the souls of Jacob went into Egypt were 75. So this text would agree with the Septuagint. These are his children and his children's children. In all 70, but 5 died in Egypt before Joseph and had no children. So supposedly that's the explanation of why 75 became 70, supposedly. But what doesn't make sense to me is why the Masoretes decided to change it in Genesis 46 before that happened. They would have not been dead in Genesis 46 and all that. That's what doesn't make sense to me. I could see Deuteronomy saying that, but way after their death. But Genesis 46, they're still alive. So it doesn't really make much sense to count it as 70 in Genesis 46:27, in my opinion. Doesn't really make much sense. But I've seen the Masoretes do that. Whenever they think there's a so-called contradiction, they feel the need to change it. And like there's a verse in Exodus where it talks about 6 days you eat unleavened bread.
Yeah.
And then it says in the very next verse, on the 7th day you also eat unleavened bread. The Masoretes in their mind think that's a contradiction. So they change the word 6 to 7. That's what I mean by these are the type of scribes that have written our Masoretic text, okay? You got to understand these guys are a little loopy. They're little nuts, okay? So they think they know better, oh, we got to change this, we got to change that. So there's no discrepancy. So it's very possible that it's not a discrepancy. It's just that later on they didn't count the extra 5. It's very possible. Even without looking at extra biblical text, most commentators will comment about Deuteronomy 10:22 and will say that. They'll say, for whatever reason, the extra 5 is not counted here. So, but whatever. So that's the whole controversy about that, the 70 versus 75. Same thing with the kind of similar to the Exodus 12:40 controversy, where you got it's saying that 434 years they were in Egypt.
Yeah.
And how the Septuagint has and Canaan 443 years. So it's actually not 400 years they were in Egypt. So that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But the Masoretes think they need to change things for whatever reason. Yeah, so Brother Yahusha already iterated about Yahuwah has made you as numerous as the stars of heaven. Okay. And again, this is a really good topic for those out there that think circumcision of the heart is a new concept.
No.
Deuteronomy 10 is a really good proof of how, yeah, it's not new. So Yahuwah originally wanted them to have not just circumcised flesh, but circumcised hearts as well. So again, it says that if you do this, you will be above all peoples, not equal, above, as you are this day. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no longer stubborn. So, oh, I love this verse. I just want to reiterate this again. This is like goes into another topic we're eventually going to record, but I love this verse here. It says, Yahuwah, your Elua, is a Elua of Elohim. He's a mighty one of mighty ones. Master of masters. Where have we heard that phrase before? Oh, I don't know. Revelations 19? Interesting. Because you got kings of kings, master of masters in Revelations 19. The great and mighty and the awesome Elua who is not partial and takes no bribe. So, yeah. Yeah, very interesting. So we got like one more chapter here. And let's see who hasn't gotten a chance to read yet. Let's see all the participants. Sister Milka, would you like to read chapter 11? Shabbat
Sure.
Shalom, by the way. Oh, you all right, sis? I think you got muted again.
Okay. Sorry, just getting the chapter. All right.
It's okay.
Therefore, you shall love Yahuwah Elohika and guard his watch and his statutes and his judgments and his commandments always. And know ye this day, for this is Moshe speaking, right? Moshe speak not, oh wait, for I speak not with your children which have not known and which have not seen the chastisement of Yahuwah Elohim, his greatness, his mighty hand, and his stretched out arm, and his miracles and his acts which he did in the midst of Mitzrayim unto Pharaoh the king of Mitzrayim and unto all his land, and what he did unto the army of Mitzrayim, unto their horses and to their chariots, how he made the water of the Red Sea to overflow them as they pursued after you, and how Yahuwah has destroyed them unto this day, and what he did unto you in the wilderness until you came into this place, and what he did unto Dathan and Avram and the sons of Eliva, the son of Reuven, how the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up and their households and their tents and all the substance that was in their possession in the midst of all Yasharal. But your eyes have seen all the great acts of Yahuwah, what he did. Therefore shall ye guard all the commandments I command you this day, that ye may be strong and go in and possess the land whither ye go to possess it, and that ye may prolong your days in the land which Yahuwah swore unto your fathers to give unto them and to their seed, a land that flows with milk and honey. For the land whither you go in to possess it is not as the land of Mitzrayim, from whence ye came out, where you sowed your seed and watered it with your foot as a garden of herbs. But the land whither you go to possess it, it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinks water of the rain of heaven, a land Yahuwah Elohika cares for. The eyes of Yahuwah Elohika are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even unto the end of the year. And it shall come to pass, if ye shall hearken diligently unto the commandments which I command you this day, to love Yahuwah Elohim, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I will give you the rain of your land in his due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that you may gather in your grain and your wine and your oil. And I will send grass in your fields for your cattle, that you may eat and be full. Guard yourself, that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other Elohim and worship them. Then Yahuwah's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heavens, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless ye perish quickly from off the good land which Yahuwah gives you. Therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. And ye shall teach them your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And ye shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, that your days may be multiplied in the days of your children, in the land Yahuwah swore unto your fathers to give them, as the days of heaven upon the earth. For if ye shall diligently guard all these commandments, which Moshe I command you to do them, to love Yahuwah Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave unto him, then will Yahuwah drive out all these nations from before you, and ye shall possess greater nations, mightier than yourselves. Every place wherein the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Perath, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. There shall no man be able to stand before you, for Yahuwah Elohim shall lay the fear of you and the dread of you upon all the land that ye shall tread upon, as he has said unto you. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing, if you obey the commandments of Yahuwah Elohim, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of Yahuwah Elohim, but turn aside out of the way which I command you this day, to go after other Elohim, which ye have not known. And it shall come to pass, when Yahuwah Elohim has brought you into the land whither you go to possess it, that you shall put the blessing upon Mount Gerizim, and the curse upon Mount Ebal. Are they not on the other side of the Yarden, by the way where the sun goes down, in the land of the Canaanim, which dwell in the plain over against Gilgal, beside the plains of Morah? For ye shall pass over the Yarden to go in to possess the land which Yahuwah Elohim gives you, and ye shall possess it and dwell therein, and ye shall guard to do all the commandments and judgments which Moshe set before you this day.
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
My bad. I forgot I was muted. I was just gonna ask you, Sister Milka, because I don't see many translators using that pronunciation or that spelling. Is that a singularity like Alua, or is that like
Aloheka is just your Lua.
Okay. Okay. I always wondered because I only saw that in the Sefer. I never saw it anywhere
Yeah.
else. I always wondered what it meant. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the blessing and the curse are placed in between one side of the Yarden and the other side of the Yarden, and then I just am reminded of what Shaul says. I think it's in Corinthians, First Corinthians, where he talks about they were basically baptized, but like unto Moshe in a sense, or immersed, like, and it's like them crossing over the Yarden. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. There's actually multiple baptisms that are mentioned in the Brit Hadashah that necessarily had nothing to do with them touching water. Not just the Masha one, but a lot of people ignore what Peter says about the flood and how water technically did not touch them. They were in the ark, and that was a type of baptism. A lot of people forget about that. Yeah, there's multiple parallels with that, with the immersion.
It's also interesting too, like, oh, was Sister Sharon talking?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. I thought you were, I didn't want to interrupt. You see in the book of Yahusha that some of the tribes don't cross over into the, or like across the Yarden. They stay on the other side, which is interesting. And then they even have to create an altar to Yahuwah to symbolize that, like, they're still wanting to like follow Yahuwah, but they're on the other side of the Yarden. So it's just interesting. Because they tell him to go and to possess the land, but some of them, Manasseh and I think who else?
Yeah, it was like Reuben, Manasseh,
Reuben, yeah.
I think half tribe of Ephraim as well.
Yeah.
And Masha didn't really like it at first. He's like, "What are you guys doing? Like, who is telling you guys to go out to war with your brothers? What are you doing?" At first, Masha was not liking what they were doing by staying back. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Why are you? What are you, cowardice or something? You're afraid?" And you know, they kind of explain to him, we just won't inherit. They kind of make a deal with Masha, like, we'll stay back here and fight with our brothers and come back here, and we just won't inherit what our brothers inherit over the Jordan. So they kind of make a deal with Masha. Masha's like, all right. He goes to Yahuwah about it, and he's like, all right, Yahuwah says good what you said. Just make sure you keep your word. To go to war with your brothers and all that. So that's kind of like the backdrop to that story that Sister Milka just talked about. So basically, Masha was not a fan of what they were saying at first. He's like, he thought they had ulterior motives, kind of like, you know, the story of Canaan. You know, when they're going in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, he's like, "Oh, what are you trying to do what those guys did? You're being afraid." You know, with the bad report thing. So yeah. What I love about this chapter, Sister Milka read, I love the end of it where it gives you a reference of what is today called the mezuzah, where you're write the commandments, ascribe them to your doorposts. Judaism calls that the mezuzah. Unfortunately, modern Judaism today, what I've noticed, they have departed from what they originally believed the application of that was. Like, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but they'll have like a little box. They'll put, you know, just a Shema. They'll just write the Shema. That's it. They'll put it in the mezuzah box. It's a metal box. And then they put the box on the doorpost. Now, according to the Targums, they originally interpreted that command that we just read about as you take a scroll, write the whole law on the scroll, and physically ascribe it to your doorpost. So they've kind of departed from what they used to believe the actual real application of that commandment was, to now traditionally, rabbinically, they just put it in a metal box. So if you see anyone with that goes all the way to like Talmudic, you know, modern interpretations, and, you know, the whole, you know, putting the commands on a little box and strapping it on your forehead. That's all rabbinical stuff. But
it's funny, the earlier rabbis would have never interpreted it as that, like putting a metal box on your door frame. They would have never interpreted it as that. So it's kind of funny. Let me see if I could just read it out for you guys just to explain what I'm talking about. So let me just take one of these targums here, show you guys what I'm talking about. The first time the commandments instanced is Deuteronomy 6, I believe. So go there first. This is my Targum Pseudo Jonathan here by Tove Rose. Let me just Deuteronomy. Go to Deuteronomy 6, right? It starts with the Shema. Oh, Yahuwah. So he says, "Hear, O Yasharal, our Father." That's interesting. So they're talking about they would interpret here Israel referring to the patriarch Israel. That's funny. Yahuwah, our Alua, is one Yahuwah. Jacob responds and said, Baruch be his esteemed name forever and ever. So then he goes on to talk about Moshe the prophet said to the people of the house of Yashar, follow after the true worship of your fathers, that you may love Yahuwah, your Alua, with each disposition of your hearts, also that he may accept your souls in service of all your wealth. Let these words which I command you this day be written upon the tablets of your hearts. Interesting. Because we see later on, Yahusha, when he talks about that, that's the purpose of the law and all that, to be on the tablet of your heart. You shall unfold them to your children, or teach them to your children. Meditate upon them when you are sitting in your houses, at the time when you are occupied in secret chambers, or in journeying by the way, at evening when you lie down, at morning when you rise. And you shall bind them as a sign upon your left hand and before your forehead, over your eyes. You shall write them. This is the part I'm talking about here. So this is how the authors of the Targums would apply this mezuzah part here. It says, and you shall write them upon the pillars and affix them in 3 places, against the cupboard, against the post of your house, and on the right hand of your gate in your going out. So also, if you jump to the chapter we just read in the Targums, it will reiterate this commandment. So basically what Sister Milka read, that commandment in Deuteronomy 11 is a re-instance of Deuteronomy 6:9. And it will say here, I can get to it here. Okay, so it says here, verse 22. Okay, so it says, I'm always trying to find the exact verse here. Let's see. Who is angry be provoked? Okay, here we go, verse 20 of Deuteronomy 11. And you shall write them upon parchment, upon the posts, and affix them to 3 against your chest, against the pillars of your house, and against your gates. So this is how they would interpret that, is that you write it on a piece of paper and you're affixing it to your doorposts, rather than what we have today with the whole metal box that they call the mezuzah. So in a very short amount of time, they changed that interpretation. I just find that interesting. And actually, by the way, how I apply it is the interpretation of the Targums seem way more realistic than what we have today in rabbinical Judaism. Where, by the way, they're not writing out the whole law. What they do is they write Deuteronomy 6:5 out on a piece of paper, just Deuteronomy 6:5, and then they put it in a metal box and they call it the mezuzah. So that's, to me, that seems like you're just doing it in your own way. You're just not wanting to really write out his whole Torah. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah. Oh, okay.
that actually makes sense. So how would that be? Your Alua. Oh, okay. Okay, the M at the end would make it plural. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a little weird. Huh. Okay. Interesting to know. But anyway, so I personally side with the Targums when you're talking about how to do the mezuzah. That's my personal opinion. I write it out on parchment. I affix it with tape to the doorposts of where I dwell and all that. And I try my best to write out the whole Torah. I don't just, write out the Shema. But I'm not trying to attack people that do that, but that kind of defeats the purpose of what we just read about, what he's commanding them to do. That kind of defeats the
Do you
purpose.
think anyone's gonna do that leather thing that?
They do that out of one of the verses here. I'll show you the exact verse where they get that, the right hand thing.
So you don't think we should be saying that, right? I don't know.
Well, it's okay to. I don't think it's a bad tradition to recite it. What I'm talking about is the metal box they do with the.
Oh, sorry,
actual-
the Elohaikim that I think
Oh,
because sorry.
Okay.
I
The
agree with
Elohaikim-
Aluhaika, but Aluhaikum,
Yeah,
me personally, no.
No, because
that's
it's
just
plural, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't do
Okay.
that. Technically, what you're saying is Yahuwah, your mighty ones, or deities. With the
Okay,
S
so
at
I
the end.
repent if I shouldn't have said that, Yahuwah,
It's okay.
on the record.
It's not your fault. You got translators that are, for lack of a better word, Masoretic biased. So, they're, so I mean, I'm pretty sure Pigeon didn't mean to deceive people, but at the end of the day, he's basing his knowledge of the Hebrew language very limited on what these rabbis would teach and all that and yeah. So but yeah, from what Brother Yahusha has came across is even when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and other manuscripts, it seems like Eloah or Alua is way more accurate. And it seems like there's more proof for that. Even just looking at Theos from the Greek, I don't think there's a plural to Theos. Like basically where you get mighty ones of the nations in the Greek is Theon. Theon would be, the gods of the Gentiles. So the Greek is actually easier to distinguish than the modern Hebrew today because for some reason, the Masoretes decided to use the same Hebrew word for the true supreme deity, as well as mighty ones of the nations. Like you could look it up for yourself in the Strongs. They will use Elohim for like both, and it's weird. Even the singulars sometimes. I would have to look back, but I think in I forget if it's Daniel or somewhere they even use Allah for like Gentile mighty ones. So it's very weird. It's very weird, and I'm not a fan of that. How they do that. How the Masoretes do that. Because in the Greek, it's two different words. You got Theos, Yahuwah, Yahusha would be Theos.
Daniel's manuscript gets tricky though because you have part of it that's written in Hebrew and then you have part of it that's written in Aramaic. So two of them are going to be dated differently.
Yeah.
The Aramaic I think is older. It's not that old. It's definitely not past I think 1000 AD. It's really not that old. But it's definitely older than the Hebrew. But then also like with that, like the Strong's is not going to give you an accurate description. You have to look at actually the text itself to see what the prefix is and what the suffix is, because the Strong's is only going to give you the root.
Yeah.
Because I've seen times where the Strong's will link you to the word Alua. However, when you look in the text itself, it'll have the im suffix at the end.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a fan of that manuscript of Daniel. It's very confusing. You have mixed language in it. It's very confusing, and like you said, it's not even that old. And I mean, it's about, so if it's 1000 AD is the earliest, then it's actually 800 years newer than the modern LXX of Daniel. The modern LXX of Daniel would be like 300 AD at the latest. So, and obviously the original Septuagint of Daniel would have been like, 100, 200 BC. So yeah, it's definitely not as easy. Like the Greek Daniel, it's easy because it's one language. You can kind of figure stuff out a lot easier with the language. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Masoretic version of Daniel for multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. Not just the language and not just the problem with the title Elohim in it, or Alua even in it, is there's bigger issues. Like I would recommend people that want to know more about that. We did a study a while back called Differences in the Book of Daniel. I really recommend you click on that video, check that out. It will explain what I'm talking about here. And it's much more than just the mixed language thing. It's, they changed a lot of things. They changed a lot of things. They took out Yahuwah's name a bunch of times, and all that. So I'm gonna try to find.
I think I could be completely wrong. Don't quote me on that, because I know the Masoretic version of Daniel, the Hebrew, like, because they're pulling from two different manuscripts. The Hebrew is the Masoretic, but the Aramaic, I don't think it's 1000 AD. I'm pretty sure I'm off on that, but I know it's not. I don't think it dates back to BC time periods.
Let me see
I'm
if I can
looking for it right now. I know there are some that believe that it's that old, but I side with the ones that don't believe that.
Just the fact that the Masoretes did not even make the Masoretic text. On the earliest they started on the Masoretic text was 7th or 8th century. I doubt the manuscript predates that. Just my personal opinion. I don't think that both manuscripts you're probably not looking at any earlier than 7th to 8th century in my personal opinion. Just based on what they had for their sources, seriously doubt that it would be, any earlier than 7th century.
The ones that believe that it's BC time period is because of the style of Aramaic that it's written in.
Yeah, that's definitely not proof. Just because it has a style.
Well, no, I mean, like, it not style, but you have different versions of Aramaic, like the way that you have different versions of Hebrew, like you have your ancient Hebrew, you have different versions of ancient Picto, and then you have different versions of Paleo that have changed over time. That's what I mean. Not like
I just have a hard time believing that, because just knowing some of the things that the Masoretes did in their version of Daniel, it's hard for me to believe they would have something that ancient survive all the way to the latter part of the AD time period. I have a hard time believing that. And just some of the literary things they do, some of the traditions they do in their version of Daniel definitely proves to me that they were also changing things. They were, I forget how many times Adonai's in there, but it's a lot. It's a lot, and sometimes it's even replacing Yahuwah with Adonai in their version. So I have a funny feeling it's definitely later than BC. I would say, I guess some of the clues in it could lead to maybe mid 4th, 5th century at the earliest, but I don't think anything before that. I really don't. I don't. I think the earliest you're talking about is like comparable to the date of the latest targums, which were like 4th, 5th, 6th century, written down. That's when they're dated to. But I seriously doubt it that it's BC. Just based on to base it on a language style, I would need more proof than that. Because we don't know how long either Aramaic has survived. It could have survived into almost the Middle Ages. So that to me doesn't really prove anything. You had.
I don't believe it's that old, but I would say that based on like depending on the type of Aramaic written, would definitely show a date. Because I could show you two different types of Aramaic. One Aramaic that looks like a Hebrew box script, and then another Aramaic that looks like Arabic cursive, both from different time periods, where one is no longer like one died out as a form of Aramaic versus one that lived on. So I could see where they're coming from with that as far as trying to date it. The type of Aramaic it's used as imperial Aramaic, which would be box script. It would look almost identical to the Babylonian Hebrew, the Hebrew that they brought back with them, the square script of Hebrew.
Yeah, if you can send me their any sources from their side of the argument, because I never even knew about that they believe it's BC time period, the Masoretic version.
No, not the Masoretic version. The Masoretic version of Daniel is pulling from two different manuscripts.
Okay.
It's not a single manuscript. Even when you go and you look in the Strongs and you look at the text itself, some of the chapters are in Hebrew, some of the chapters are in Aramaic.
Okay, so all right, I could see maybe they pulled from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Maybe that's what would have them believe it's from 100 BC or whatever. If their Hebrew part of it's from the Dead Sea Scrolls, I could see that being plausible. I don't know any Aramaic versions of Daniel though that would be dated that far back. Most of the Peshitas we have today, even just Tanakh Peshitas, are like 100 AD. That's the earliest. And the Peshitta we have today, I looked this up recently and looked at my Bible chart book. They're claiming that the Peshitta we have today is not even the original Peshitta. It would be a 300 AD manuscript. So that's why in my personal opinion,
This person that I'm reading right here believes a 1st century BC. This is as far back as he's willing to go. He's saying that the Aramaic of Daniel is simply a part of Imperial Aramaic in itself, practically undateable with any conviction within 600 to 330 BC. So most people will date it to like 600 to 330. He's saying on paleographic and linguistic grounds, it belongs to the 1st century BC. Which I'm okay with saying that because our Septuagint is around 300 BC. So I could see them changing stuff, getting closer to the time when Yahusha came. Even with the Dead Sea Scrolls, I see times where it'll side more with Masoretic text than with I would say 90% of the time it'll side with the Septuagint, but there is that 10% that seems to have been changed that'll side with the Masoretic.
Okay, I can see their argument. I can see like what you're saying, I can see their argument. Problem is that the Paleo Hebrew has lasted longer than that. And you have modern Paleo Hebrew scripts even going into the 1st century AD. So
You do, but at the same time, you were having other people writing in Aramaic. We know that they were writing the Targums in Aramaic that have changes and additions. So we know that there were preserved manuscripts, but at the same time, there were also corrupted manuscripts at the exact same time.
yeah, the reason I say that is the Samaritan script itself is supposed to be a late Paleo, and the earliest most people put the Samaritan Pentateuch at the earliest is 100 AD. So it was still a written language going into the AD time period. So that's why I would have to look into more proof other than they're just basing it off of the language that it's from the BC time period. Because even Aramaic, you have Aramaic manuscripts going throughout, the mid couple hundreds AD time period. I mean, Syriac is similar to Aramaic. It's hard to, in my personal opinion, this is just conjecture here. I can't date something based on its language. I have to date something based on its content and what it's saying. Like, the reason we know that the reason it was easy for us to date the Septuagint as well is because we had a historical letter, the letter of Aristeas. We had an actual person giving us a story about when it was written and all that. It's hard for me to base date any manuscript based off of its language, because languages, some languages will last for a very long gap of time, and there's no way to tell based on a script that, okay, well, it has to be in this time period. Could they be right that it was in the BC time period? Yeah, it's possible, but it could also have been a little bit later than that, and it's just it uses a script that would have still been around, because from what I know about the Paleo Hebrew script, it wasn't really, it basically, according to people that have looked into this about 1st century Israel, they say that yes, Aramaic was kind of superseding it, but not as a liturgical language. So you still would have had them somewhat using the Paleo Hebrew even in the 1st century AD. And so that's why I'm like, it's hard for me to date something based on the language. And like, even Aramaic, I don't think we got the modern Aramaic script until much later, if I'm not mistaken. The modern boxed Aramaic script, I think, didn't happen until much, much later. So, it's, I don't know. This is just my opinion. This is from what I've seen others researched on, and people have shown that certain languages we thought died earlier on have actually lasted longer than we realized. So it's hard for me to, make a decision on dating a manuscript based on just the language. I have to look at what's in the manuscript, how accurate is the manuscript. If the manuscript seems like it's a lot more corrupted than these other manuscripts, most likely it's a later manuscript. Like, for example, the Masoretic text, it's easy to see that it's a very late manuscript because a lot of changes have been made, versus the Samaritan, versus the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls, even, by the way, they don't date every scroll found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 3rd to 6th century. So with the Daniel, I personally would like to look into it myself. Those that found the Daniel scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls, or even if there's a full scroll of it still there, where they dated it to, because some of the scrolls, they date like 3rd, 2nd, and 1st century. Not all of them are, up into the time of the Septuagint. So some of them are like, even the fragments, some of the fragments are actually later on. So I would just like to look into it myself to see when the Dead Sea Scroll experts even date that Daniel, to see how early that is. But I could see their argument for the Hebrew part of it, not for the Aramaic. It would be kind of hard for, I mean, unless I'm wrong and there was Aramaic manuscripts that were written that far back. I don't know. The earliest, like I said, the earliest Aramaic that people know of are like 100 AD, 200 AD, or a little bit later than that.
This version of the Aramaic is basically what we call today box script Hebrew.
Yeah.
There's literally no difference. So when people are writing in box script Hebrew today, the Hebrew that they brought back with them from Babylon, that basically is Aramaic.
Okay.
They're basically the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Versus what Aramaic used to be. That's why, like, some people will say that like when people are writing in Hebrew, they're really not writing in Hebrew. They're writing in what they think is Hebrew, but it's really not Hebrew. It's what became Hebrew. It's really basically just Imperial Aramaic, or Imperial Aramaic is Babylonian Hebrew, as far as what I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that too. I think Shoshana's mentioned that a couple of times, which she's found as well. Yeah, so yeah, it's possible. Like definitely the language of itself could date that far back. I just don't remember. I don't remember any manuscripts being mentioned that people have found that in that language that would date that far back. I've yet to see any discoveries of people that would say that there's an Aramaic manuscript that's far back to 600 BC. As far as I know, the original story that I know about, the book of Daniel was originally written in Paleo, and then a couple hundred years later, it was translated into Koine Greek, or whatever Greek the Septuagint translators would have used. So if there's an Aramaic after that, then the earliest I could put a Aramaic Daniel at the earliest would be like maybe first century BC. I can't see any earlier than that. So
then even it's not really even a, well, I guess it would have been from, if it's fragments, then that would mean that there was
yeah.
at one point a full manuscript. Never mind.
Yeah, what I do know about the Dead Sea Scrolls is there is fragments of a lot of these books, but yeah, it's hard to date when exactly the full manuscript of those books would have been, because all the 80-90% of what they have is fragments. Like the Isaiah scroll, the Great Isaiah Scroll, it's the only one I've seen people have proven that it's like 300 and something BC. That's written in Paleo Hebrew, by the way, so it's not written in box script. So a lot of the 3rd century ones were written in Paleo Hebrew. So like just to clarify for the audience, I'm not saying that the box Hebrew didn't exist back then. We obviously know that the Aramaic script existed back then and all that. But the what I'm trying to say is I have yet to see a manuscript, a physical Aramaic manuscript being found that dates back to that time. And it seems like they didn't even use Aramaic as a written language. The Hebrews didn't until they're fully back in from Babylon and all that. So, and even with the traditions of the Targums, just to give you guys an example, they spoke the Aramaic, but they didn't write it down initially. So even with the Targums, right, the earliest Targum you have written is like the Onkelos. The earliest they have it dated to is 35 AD to 125 AD as the original. Now, what we have today of the Onkelos is 300 AD. It's a copy. So that's all we have at our fingertips. That's all I'm trying to say. As far as physical evidence, that's all we have. Like we know for a fact Paleo Hebrew was used for a very long time, manuscript wise. Greek was used obviously in the 3rd century BC. Somewhere Aramaic around that time would have started being used. The problem is we don't have any tangible
physical full Aramaic manuscript. Whatever Aramaic they probably used, if I was to guess, is fragmented. Whatever Aramaic the Masoretes used, because mind you, the Masoretes didn't even exist until like 7th, 8th century AD. These guys were not even in existence until that point. So they would have had very limited resources. And according to the story, that if you guys are interested, you could look up in Encyclopedia Britannica. I'll give you guys the link for it. They were using oral traditions. They were using this. They were using that to make up their Bible. They were kind of compiling different types of sources for their Tanakh. And I believe some of those traditions that they talk about are probably oral traditions, traditions that might have been passed down. I would like to look also into, just for my personal curiosity, if there was a Targum of Daniel, because I do believe there was a Targum of the prophets. So if they had an earlier Daniel, like, very early 1st century AD, a Targum of Daniel definitely would have been a very possible source. That's the only really manuscripts I know that could have been written from like 1st to 4th century AD, that early, that they could have been using. Yeah, there is a Targum of Daniel, by the way. I'm looking this up right now. There is in existence. So maybe that's what they used. I don't know. We're speculating at this point. I don't know. All I know is that there were Aramaic manuscripts called the Targums. They were in the they were kind of like in between manuscripts date-wise, between the Septuagint and the Masoretic. So you have the Septuagint 3 something BC, 300 something BC. Masoretic like 1000, 1100 AD. In between that time, you had the Targums being physically written down between the 1st century AD to like 4th, 5th century AD. So that little middle time period, the Aramaic Daniel in a Targum form could have existed, and obviously existed, because they even have one today. So obviously it existed. So I could see that as being probable of what their source was. That's a very probable one. But even with the Targums of the Torah, the BC is definitely not a probability at all. And so that, but anyway, so they got all these different links out there, Daniel and rabbinic literature and all this stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting takes they have on them. So yeah. Anyway, so that was, interesting little midrash we had going back and forth there. But yeah, if people are interested, you could definitely, look into that yourselves. I know it's very extensive when you get into the whole manuscript studies and stuff like that. But anyway, all right. So I think that's it for today, right? That was chapter 11. That was it. Anyway, so I don't think there's anything else I wanted to bring up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the study, and Yahuwah willing, stay tuned. Yahuwah willing, there's definitely a couple topics I would definitely like to do a study about. Two main that are been on my mind lately that I need to pray to Yahuwah about and ask his counsel about is which one to do next is the divine counsel study I want to do, but also want to do a study and kind of like an expose exposing the Westcott Hort text and warning people about certain New Testament manuscripts. So anyway, so please stay tuned, everyone. Love all of our brothers and sisters out there. Love you guys. Shabbat shalom. Have a great rest of your Shabbat, and see you next